Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Rockwood number NX2648. This is a coordinator. It's an unusual coordinator. I don't recall the last time I sold an NX2648 coordinator. Sell coordinators all the time, and these are called bar style coordinators, and there's three types of coordinators: bar type, gravity type, and then like a universal type. It's a couple of rods with wheels on the end. That's the universal. The gravity type is a long rod and a shorter rod that hang off the header, and they just hang down, controlled by gravity. Then there's the bar style, which is the NX2648 and all of its sister products that are the bar style coordinators. Simply stated, coordinators are used in applications when you must time the closing of two doors. They are used when you want to functionally secure doors in a secured position, whether that be for a non-fire rated door opening or far more commonly fire rated openings. And a real typical application for such is going to be a pair of doors where you have a lock set on one door, whatever it is. Can be mortise style exit devices, can be cylindrical locks, can be any sort of latching hardware, where you then have automatic or semi-automatic flush bolts in the inactive door. And you will generally also see an astragal installed as well. You don't always have to see an astragal installed as well. It could be pairs of doors that are not fire rated, and you've got weather stripping out there, split astragals that just meet in the middle. But you do need to close one door first, the inactive door. So the active door, and this is how they work, the coordinator times the pairs of doors. So the inactive door with the flush bolt type hardware installed in it closes first, and then the active door will close in, and the act of the active door closing forces the latch or latches on the inactive door to project into the frame, header, the sill, if that is the type of flush bolts that you have, securing both doors at that point. The downside of this sort of application is you might run afoul of life safety code because one door must be opened before the other. So there will be an outline governing that, if that is the application you have, and your occupancy load, the mathematics of how to determine what you have to have in terms of door size with exit hardware or fire, whether you have panic hardware or fire exit hardware, will be determined by that. You might be able to have in a pair of doors, based on the quantity of occupancy, just one door with the exit device, and then the other door will have nothing on it, meaning you don't put any dummy trim on there so as to confuse the user. You wouldn't put a dummy exit device, even though those do exist, on the door. But regardless of the final application, when you need to time two doors, for whatever reason, hardware conflicting when the doors are closed in a random sequence, you'll use a coordinator. The gravity coordinator, which of course Rockwood has, and there is a link below this video to a document called Product Brochure where you can review this bar coordinator. To get to the gravity coordinator, you would need to, actually no, it's the Product Brochure where they're going to show all of the gravity coordinators that are available, the gravity and then the universal style. The gravity coordinator is used when cost is the most important thing. They are the least elegant in terms of long-term use, long-term faithful operation. Certainly the least elegant when it comes to the aesthetics of the opening, because you constantly have this gizmo hanging off the pull side of the door at the header, hanging down over the doors. But you'll very often see them in hospitals, certainly hospitals that are a few decades old at this point, 30, 40, 50 plus years old. You'll see coordinators installed in those applications, gravity style coordinators. The universal style is kind of a hybrid of a bar style with a couple of articulated arms on it with wheels. Those are nice because you really don't see them, but you would of course be a bit limited in terms of what openings you can and cannot control with them. You couldn't do this NX2648 job, and we're going to get into why in a moment with that type of coordinator. The advantage of the bar style is it's most elegant in terms of its looks. Unless you're really looking for the hardware, you're not going to notice it. It's concealed. It's not concealed. It blends into the geometries of the frame. You really don't see it. And the only downside of such a piece of hardware is you obviously have closers. If you have surface closers and they're mounted parallel arm fashion, you will certainly need mounting brackets, which of course Rockwood can provide you, because when you install the bar coordinator, you can't run screws into the housing for your parallel arm bracket, of which you're going to have maybe 10 screws that may or may not pierce that, 8 probably for sure, that will potentially pierce through that, total. So you'll need mounting brackets for that. But those go part and parcel with a coordinator installation. Mounting brackets would, because you obviously have door closers. Now, let's move forward. And before moving on, there is another piece of hardware that's listed in the product brochure called a carry bar, which is not unusual it's not unusual to see it in the right application. You just don't see them very often. Basically, a carry bar is going to be used very often when you have a coordinator, when you are permitted to open either door, but it is a potential conflict of the hardware itself when you push one door before pushing the other. The carry bar helps dissolve away the potential for a hardware conflict. Here's what I mean. There is, if you were to look at the carry bar in the product brochure that is on the third page, your 1100, it says a carry bar is used when it is possible to open the inactive door before opening the active door. Really, where I see that sort of application is a pair of doors where you have a mortise or a rim device, a mortise exit device or a rim device, rim exit device, and then a vertical rod, concealed or surface mount. So either door has an exit device, but it would really be better for you to hit the active door first, but who's to say what door to hit first? And where I most commonly come into contact with these openings that have carry bars: hospital, corridor of egress, surface vertical rod on the inactive, mortise exit device on the active. So what happens is the latch bolt of the mortise device is going into the strike of the inactive door. If you were to push the inactive door to get out, that inactive door is really going to be pushing on the latch bolt of the active door, forcing the latch bolt to be spread into the frame opening of the strike, giving the potential for obvious damage to the latch bolt of the mortise exit device. A carry bar mounts onto that inactive door with a spring-loaded flipper and a wheel, so that when you hit the inactive door to get out, the carry bar is actually what's going to push the active door open, rather than the force hitting the back of the latch bolt. Okay, and that's what a carry bar does. You don't see them, but you do bump into them. Coordinators and carry bars do go together. They certainly can go together. You wouldn't use a carry bar with your automatic flush bolt because there's nothing on that door to push, because technically by code you're not permitted. You're specifically disallowed from putting anything on that door that would resemble a lock. And in fact, I think the code basically says there is to be nothing on that door in that sort of application. Now, that's what a carry bar is. The rest of the product brochure refers to the mounting brackets. You can dive into that. Those are separate videos, but you're very likely going to need those as well. If for some reason you had door closers mounted on the pull side, which you could, or you could have concealed closers. You could certainly have, or floor closers. You could certainly have that. But if you're going to do parallel arm bracket style closers, you'll need mounting brackets. Absolutely, you will. And there's two different types, and the only difference between the two is the jam depth. So you'll just select the one for the proper jam depth. Now, moving forward, there is, with the hardware installation instructions, and they are too linked down below this video, called installation template it might be called. What makes the NX2648 unusual is that this specific coordinator is used specifically for a 4-foot wide opening where you've got a coordinator length of 42-inch. So that's literally where you have a really big active door and then a really small inactive door. Okay, that's where that's going to be used. I will refer to the installation instructions and let's go through it. Step 1, and I'm looking at the ones that are included with the hardware. Okay. I am looking at the one that's uploaded currently is a 2011 version. At least I believe it to be a 2011. The one that is with the hardware is a 2017 version, so I will be sure to have them both there, and I'll be looking at the 2017 version. Step 1, before you get to step 1, install coordinator before any other hardware except the hinges. Step 1, prepare the door. Close door against stop. Locate active and inactive door strikes as shown in the drawing. Drill first hole in strike on active door at 1 1/4 from stop on frame, and first hole on strike for the inactive door at 47.5. Okay, let's take a moment and study that. But you're certainly going to bump into the fact that that can't be right. And the reason we know it's not right, first of all, you don't have 47.5-inch width on your opening. Plus, they're saying refer to drawing 2654. And once you study the housing length table a little bit, you'll see a reference to a 54 is going to be for a housing length of 52-inch. So when you look at the table, the housing length table, we're really dealing with, back to step 1, close door against stop, locate active and inactive door strikes as shown in the drawing. Drill the first hole at 1 1/4. They're all at 1 1/4. Then it's dependent on the housing length. We're dealing with a 42-inch housing length, so you really need to be at 37.5 for that A dimension, which is the stop on the frame, or the soffit, some people will call it, to the first hole for its strike. So just to define terms here a little bit. If this was the frame cross-section of the header and then the jamb, you're going to be installing it in this area here on the soffit. That's the soffit. Okay, or let's just look at the cross-section of the, let's look at an elevation of the frame real quick. That's an elevation of a frame, but with your 2-inch profile. Now, if I were to add the stop line to this drawing, and this is just a really poor sketch, so forgive me, that 5/8 stop, okay, we're measuring from the soffit, the inside of where that's going to mount, okay? So that's where the 1 1/4 is being dimensioned off of, okay? So close the door. Locate, you're going to put your strikes on first, and the strikes are included. You're going to get a couple of steel zinc coated strikes, zinc plated. Let's take a look. There'll be 2 of them naturally. Okay, dimensions. Overall width 3-inch, overall height about 1 1/4. They are indeed made of steel with a zinc plating on them. Then they're giving you a 1/16 of an inch from the soffit down. Doors are closed. You're standing on the push side of the opening. Okay, push side. And for those strikes, you're going to get screws. They're combination wood machine screws, so you'll be able to run that into a steel door or a wood door, 832 thread. It'll look like that. Okay. The installation instructions are not really clear what side they want them mounted in. You know, if it was me, I would be putting the screws at the top, at the head. They kind of refer to it as being in the center of the plate. I'd put those towards the soffit is where I would put them. I think that's where you're going to have primary contact of your hardware anyway. So you got to do a reality check. So first, 1.25 inches over to the first hole, looking at step 1, active door side, 1.25 inches, then 2 3/8, then your next hole at 37.5, and then 2 3/8. Mark your holes, double check everything, make sure that you're a 1/16 of an inch down. Once you know everything's accurate, take your center punch your holes, attach your strikes. Then you're in really good shape. Moving on to step 2, fasten coordinator. Locate 2600 series coordinator as shown. Drill mounting holes with a number 10 drill. You know, should you convert that to fractions, or will you? Yeah, you probably will, because you have a fractional drill bit set. If you do a lot of hardware, would it be really cool for you to invest in a wire size? It would be, because they're, you know, fractional sizes don't get close enough when it comes to holes, especially if you're drilling and tapping, right? 13/64 or whatever it is for a 1224. I don't remember. Sometimes is okay, but there are other sizes that you'll drill and tap that take a wire size. A wire size would be a really nice Christmas gift to yourself. Merry Christmas. Oh, there you go. Number 10 drill. Install 1224 thread forming screws. I don't see any thread forming screws here. They have machine screws. Pardon me, they have round head machine screws. So that's going to be your 1224 with a number 10 drill. Be sure the coordinator is properly positioned before drilling and installing screws. See chart above for mounting hole locations. Reinforcement is advised at hole locations and frames. Sure, if you're going to order a hollow metal frame, you're going to order it reinforced for this hardware. And if you're going to order hollow metal doors, you're going to order it reinforced for this hardware. It needs to be drilled and tapped. Otherwise, it's just not going to last. And if it's fire rated, you know, that's not a good idea when that hardware comes loose in 5 years. And now you've got a door, now you've got maintenance personnel at a hospital that have no legitimate way to mitigate that loose problem because you're not permitted to do anything in the field to the door. So order it properly. Now looking at the drawing in step 2, and I'm going to pull this coordinator out and we're going to play with it in a minute. You can see where it's calling out. Your active door now is going to have the trigger at the end, and it's time to pull it out. Or your active door is going to have the really big trigger. It's also going to have some adjustment on it as well, which we're going to go over. But the really cool part about this, first of all, it's not handed. You can put it on this way, you can put it on this way, put it on this way, you can put it on this way. However, but specifically, this bar length is 42 inch. Now, I've already measured it, and it's 42 inch on the nose. It's going to include your filler bar, and I'm going to go over that in a moment. Super important, and this is probably the whole deal here. It's labeled, it's listed and labeled. Your inspector, whomever it is, the AHJ, the maintenance supervisor, someone you've hired who's a certified fire and egress door inspector, is going to be looking for that. That means that the manufacturer has literally paid the money to have this tested in a proper fire environment, in a proper fire-rated test, fire door test, and it has been found to be compliant. You have to have that. I can't imagine any coordinators that are not rated or listed, at least listed. Don't quote me, but you know, if it's a coordinator, it's probably fire rated. Now, how do these work? This is the big trigger at the active door side. And you can see that it's locked. It does not permit me to push that down. The other trigger down here, that can be pushed in. So, here we go. This is the active side with this adjustable spring, and we're going to talk about that. It's really about tension. I can't push it, so what happens? This always gets pushed. You got your inactive door. What's it supposed to do? It's supposed to close first. Because over here, when your active door closes, the strike hits that and it can't go until the active door closes. That gets depressed. That's depressed. What happens over here now? I can go. That's out. I can't go. That's in. I can go. And that's how coordinators work. Really simple devices. Doing a reality check on where you're going to locate all the holes, that's pretty easy. You can see that first dimension at 7/8 on the paperwork to the first hole. That's literally just going to be a measurement from the active side to that first hole. That's 7/8. And you can lay out, and you should lay out the rest of the holes to make sure that you're doing everything accurately. You don't want to have to drill and then re-drill. That's a problem because unfilled holes cannot exist on fire-rated doors. 4-inch over to the next hole, then 3/4 inch. That's all accurate. I'm measuring that and looking at it. Down the line, so to speak. Now you get the idea of why you can't just screw into this, because there's obviously something inside of this bar coordinator that's operating. There's obviously something in here. Okay, I don't know exactly what it looks like, but it's obviously a rod, some sort of rod of linkage. Note, step 2, note field adjustment of door closers is required after installation of coordinator to ensure against doors closing too fast and changing coordinator mechanism. Field adjustment of coordinator override could be needed. Use Phillips head screwdriver to set lever spring. Turn clockwise to increase override for heavy doors. So this has an override feature, meaning if you have somebody that pushes the door closed, this will override and permit it to close without destroying the hardware. You could be in a situation where your door is closing with such closing force from the spring of the closer that it's overriding the unit, not permitting proper operation. So at that point you will test your override setting via the Phillips screw that's inside of here, okay? And you can set the amount of force it takes. I can't get that to break with my hand, which I'm not surprised that I can't. And I don't want to force it into an override mode. Step 3, mounting brackets. Those are optional, but probably necessary. In some situations where hardware such as parallel arm door closers or surface vertical rod strikes would normally be mounted to the doorstop, installation becomes a little more complicated because the coordinator now covers the stop and no holes can be drilled into the coordinator, which would interfere with the coordinator mechanism. So the mounting brackets, depending on your stop width, either 2 1/4, either 7/8 up to 2 1/4, or greater than 2 1/4. So what does that mean? This is your frame jam depth between my two fingers. This is the rabbit, this is the rabbit, this is the stop. You have to calculate what's my stop size. Well, if it's a 5 3/4 frame, which is most common, and you have equal rabbits, meaning each rabbit is 1 15/16, minus 1.9375 minus 1.9375. 5 3/4 minus inch and 15/16 minus inch and 15/16 gives you 1 7/8. Okay, bingo. So you would use the proper mounting bracket. If you had unequal rabbit, where you got 1 9/16, 1.5625? No. Yeah, 1.5625. For the small rabbit, you'll have 2 1/4. So unequal rabbit, 5 3/4, you're going to use that smaller one as well. You get into an 8 3/4 frame, there ain't no way you're going to use the small one. You get into anything bigger than 5 3/4 and unequal rabbit, you'll need to look at the different style of bracket. It's a more of an L shape rather than a stepped piece of mounting bracket hardware. Very typical. There's a cross section in the installation instructions that literally show you what it will look like. You just need to make sure that the screws of your hardware don't pierce into the bar cord, into the coordinator itself. Note, when mounting brackets are used, be sure to lower mounting holes for door-applied hardware 15/16 to allow for coordinator and mounting brackets. So what that means is, back to what you're going to use it for, parallel arm style door closers or surface vertical rod exit devices, the templating, you've got to lower that position by 15/16, which obviously is going to come into to lower mounting holes for 15/16 to allow for coordinator and mounting brackets. You're going to need to measure. Okay, the bar itself is about 5/8. So they're giving you 15/16 to account for the mounting bracket as well. Obviously, a Rockwood mounting bracket. If it's not, all bets are off. If you're using another manufacturer, no harm, no foul. But just make sure that you're still at the right thickness of what you're adjusting. And that's where you're going to use those mounting brackets. When you've got hardware that needs to mount onto the soffit. Obviously, a problem with coordinators and gasketing, whether it be for fire or smoke or insulation, you need to think about where you're going to apply that material because you can get into trouble with having all of this hardware need to fit in the same place at the same time. Obviously, if you're dealing with overhead stops, that's going to be problematic as well. You could easily get into a conflict with that material, so you have to adjust for that in terms of the hardware that you'll use. Step 4 down there as well gives you an overview of the carry bar, which you could bump into. And if you have carry bar, this item can be supplied in situations which can allow the inactive door to open before the active. The carry bar will throw the active door open and allow the coordinator to engage both doors and coordinate them to close correctly. The carry bar is not needed when the inactive door is equipped with flush bolts. Sure, because you can never open that door first. You have to open the active first and then the inactive. And what they're saying, push the active door out far enough so that you can get the triggers released or relieved to the point where then they'll engage, is what they'll do. And that covers all of the information on this coordinator. The logic applies to all of the Rockwood bar style coordinators in terms of where you mount it, how you mount it. The only thing you do have to make sure is that the installation instructions really are not specific for this NX2648, so you really have to lay that out. Again, if you were to try to have drilled a hole at 47.5, you would run out of real estate. You don't have 47.5 between the stops on your frame. You're going to have 46 and 5/8 maybe. So at that point, you'll say to yourself, "Well, gosh, what am I actually doing here?" Reality check is always good on something when it's new or when you're doing it for the first time, because it does allow you to not make any mistakes. When you install this, lastly, you're going to have some room left over. Well, you don't have to install the filler bar, but you want to because it's going to make it look really nice. And the overall length of all of this put together, and we said this is for a 48-inch opening, is going to be 46 and 5/8. And what did I say earlier you'd have? I should have said 46 and 5/8. 5/8, 5/8, inch and a quarter, 46 and 3/4 would be, but having it marginally 1/8 of an inch smaller. So the filler bar is just doing that. It's filling the opening so that from down below, it all looks consistent, okay? And depending on the size of the active door and the inactive leaf, the size of the filler bar is adjusted because the length of the active coordinator too is adjusted to account for what size of opening that you're doing. You could have something really less common like this where you've got a bigger active door and a really small inactive door, or you could just have a pair of 3-foot doors. Or you could have a 4.0 and a 2.0. Whatever, or 3.6 and a 2.6. That's not necessarily uncommon. The point of the matter is the name Rockwood is synonymous with very high quality trim and auxiliary hardware, a name that I am personally partial to, and it's because of the excellent high caliber fit and finish of their trim and auxiliary hardware, the absolute astronomical caliber of their tech support people, their customer service people across the board. They are my favorite overall. They may not be excellent in every single department, but in the majority of areas when it comes to trim and auxiliary hardware, Rockwood would be the name that I would never exclude when it comes to a project that you're working on. Any questions on the NX2648 coordinator? And by the way, this is in black finish, black prime coat. Available finishes are going to be others. Let's take a look really quick. While I'm waiting for the catalog to open of the other colors, there is also an option for security screws. The screws that are included with this hardware are just going to be Phillips, so you may not be able to permit such a screw type in your application. You might literally need to have something that's going to give you the ability to resist someone from unscrewing that material, which certainly may not be unusual. NX2648, other finishes, black prime coat, very common. They can even do, they can do aluminum as well. So either aluminum or black. No prime coat can they do on this, but those would be the two finishes. There's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Rockwood products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog, several other encyclopedic documents, older versions of catalogs and price lists, but also the Rockwood RM series, the series of custom door pulls that they sell. There's about a 100-page catalog of every different type of door pull imaginable. If you've ever walked into a restaurant or a bank or an office building and there's long pulls on the door, those are very likely Rockwood. Their name may not be, not that it may not be, but it is certainly not the most synonymous with door pulls, but you will find their pulls in countless applications where you want to have the hardware literally stand as proud as the door itself, and that's where those Rockwood RM series pulls come into play. Any questions on the NX2648 coordinator or any other Rockwood product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.